There are three women that are possible victims of Tom Wallace and Cap Hatfield the night of the beatings at the Daniels cabin. They are Nancy L. McCoy Phillips, Mary Magdalene McCoy Daniels, and or Victoria Daniels Dotson. Come along with us as we walk through the women's lives to see which two were at the cabin that night, and why were they there. Come along with us as we sort through the events that happened one night in June 1884 at the Daniels cabin. All aboard the Kentucky Tennessee Living Time Machine. Please fasten your seatbelts and keep your arms and legs inside of the vehicle at all times. But to get going, we need your help. We still need to fire up that time machine to transport us. Please help us by clicking on the like, subscribe, and bell notification buttons down below. Not only does this fire up the time machine for our flight back in time, but it convinces the YouTube algorithm that we need a bigger vehicle to reach more people who love history as much as you do. Now, back to our story. Mary Magdalene McCoy Daniels. First, we will talk about the history of the only undisputed woman in this story. Mary was the daughter of Asa Harmon McCoy and Martha Klein. She was born in Pike County, Kentucky on February 15, 1848. Mary McCoy married William Bill Daniels on November 22, 1866. Daniels was the son of Richard Daniels and Margaret Charles of Pike County, Kentucky. Mary gave birth to 14 children and also helped to raise a few grandchildren into adulthood. Her children grew up on a working farm that William and Mary had provided. The farmhouse was large and set along the Tug River near Freeburn, Kentucky. There was a fireplace in each bedroom. The Daniels cabin was so large that church and funeral services were held in her home. According to all versions of the story, Mary was dragged out of bed in the middle of the night by Cap Hatfield. She was forced upon her knees in front of the fireplace in the bedroom and beaten by him. Her husband was forced to watch at gunpoint. Mary suffered the worst of the night, and this was so severe that 2 of Mary's ribs were broken and her lungs were damaged. Because of the damage, everyone thought that she would die inside of a year from consumption. But did she? It turns out that Mary would outlive her husband by 40 years. She never remarried and would sell off her land in her later years. Mary died on April 11, 1939, at the age of 91 years old. Victoria Daniels. Victoria was born on March 13, 1870, in Pike County, Kentucky, to William and Mary Daniels. She was the second born of 14 children. Her headstone reads that she was born in 1873 and her name was Charles. But this is in conflict with the family Bible that reads her birth had taken place in 1870 and her name was Daniels, not Charles. Victoria married William Thomas Tom Wallace in 1886 in Logan County, West Virginia. There is no date for the divorce. She would go on to marry William Thompson Charles on March 28, 1889 in Pike County, Kentucky. They would also divorce, but we do not have the date. Victoria would go on to marry a third time to Johnson Anderson Dotson in 1907. John and Victoria would move to Oliver, Ohio in 1910. We tend to believe that the son would be correct about the other woman at the cabin being Victoria. However, it is not correct that she was Tom Wallace's legal wife at that time. They could have simply been living together. However, it was during this time that Tom Wallace was being mean to Victoria. And it would only make sense that since she left him over it, he needed to take out his anger and frustration on her. The most dangerous time for a woman is when she actually attempts to leave the abusive situation. It would not be out of the realm of behavioral possibility that Tom Wallace told Cap Hatfield that she was responsible for the supposed betrayal and she needed to face punishment for it. All the while, he wanted to punish her for leaving him. This is typical behavior in abusive situations. A huge clue in the Sun article that makes us lean more toward Victoria being the victim in this situation is that Tom Wallace himself whipped the woman. Now we have to say this. Many find it strange that Victoria ended up marrying and later divorcing Thomas after the night at the Daniels cabin. And again, we do not know if the pair were living together before they were married or not. But without judgment, we will say that the marriage of the pair is not that unusual. They had no children together during their entire relationship. We do know that Victoria outlived Thomas by 12 years. Thomas died on September 16, 1933, at the age of 84 in Guyan, Wyoming County, West Virginia. Victoria died on June 24, 1945, in Phelps, Pike County, Kentucky, at the age of 75. Nancy L. McCoy Hatfield Phillips. Nancy was the youngest daughter born to Asa Harmon McCoy and Martha Klein McCoy sometime in August 1865 in Pike County, Kentucky. Nancy and Mary were indeed sisters. Nancy would marry John C. Hatfield in 1881. Johnson and Nancy would have 2 children together. There is no date for her divorce from him. She would go on to marry Frank Phillips Sr. in 1895. She would have 2 children by Frank, one who died as an infant, and raised 3 children that belonged to Frank. Frank would die just 3 years after their marriage. We will give the reason why it would not be plausible for Nancy to be the second woman at the cabin, but she could have been the catalyst. At the time, she was married to Johnson Hatfield. She would have still been pregnant with her first child, William Anderson Anstey Hatfield, who would have been born on August of 1884. The family would have considered her untouchable as she was carrying a Hatfield child. The risk would have been too great for her losing the child for her to endure the beating by Tom Wallace. One plausible story. We could see the possibility of this situation happening. Let's suppose that Nancy was at the home of Aunts Hatfield when she got word that he gave orders for Calvin and Randolph McCoy to be ambushed while coming home from court. She could have said that she wanted to visit her sister and niece since her time of childbirth was drawing near. While visiting her 2 kinswomen, she could have given them the heads up about what was going to happen to their uncle and first cousin. While she could not tell the men directly what she had witnessed, she told the next best people to relay the message to them. After Nancy had left the cabin, we can visualize that either Mary or Victoria, or even both of them, went to their Uncle Randolph to give the message. Now, think on this a moment. What if, and we are only saying what if here, Randolph talked to the Scott brothers to dress like them as a way of protecting the 3 ladies who told them of the plot? And also, as a sort of protection, Sam McCoy went along with the Scott brothers in case of trouble. Then, Randolph and Calvin would leave the trial by using a different direction home. It seems odd that the McCoys and the Scotts were dressed in the same manner accidentally. We realize that that could happen, but really, what were the odds? A second plausible story. Let's back up and start that again, shall we? Nancy McCoy Hatfield learns of the plot to kill her uncle and her cousin. She tells Victoria and Mary all about it. But it's just gossip between women and it goes no further. Or, just to be spicy, they tell Randolph and Calvin, but they do nothing about it. The fact that the Scott brothers were dressed just like them is pure coincidence. The McCoys get done with their court business concerning Tobert's widow and stay back to talk to Perry Klein about the Hatfields' murder trial case. In the meantime, the Scott brothers and Sam McCoy start on their way home. Randolph and Calvin McCoy are not that far behind them. The shooting begins, the McCoys hear it, and then turn around and take another path home. Conclusion of Chapter 5. But either plausible way, the women were still punished for gossiping about the potential ambush, and blamed for Randolph and Calvin McCoy still being alive. But were they really guilty of this? Were they the ones that warned the McCoys of the ambush? Or was it mere coincidence that Nancy chose that time to go speak to her sisters? But this event is not over. There will be more bloodshed over the events that happened at the Daniels cabin. In next week's video, we will begin with the murder of Jeff McCoy. He was one of the few McCoys that was not involved in the feud. Why was he picked out for the shooting? How was Aunt Hatfield able to lure him to the Hatfield's property? And what excuse did the Hatfields use to kill Jeff McCoy? Thank you. We at Kentucky, Tennessee Living would like to thank you for watching our video series on the myths and truths of the Hatfield and McCoy feud. Don't forget to hit that like button, as the more likes we receive, the more likely YouTube is to suggest our videos to other viewers. Also, to receive notice when we upload a new video, be sure to subscribe and click the bell notification button. Please be sure to double check that you are subscribed, as some of our viewers are finding that they are no longer subscribed to our channel. We thank you for continuing to support Kentucky, Tennessee Living as we are discovering the mysteries in Appalachian history.